Welcome back to Indian Trace. I had to ask myself today if I wanted to continue or do another top shelf, and that's what you're seeing. Is just my top shelf pieces. Now, of course, there's 7 other trays. But where I wanted to begin today, if I wanted to do a documentary of one of these bins, which I've been doing with Stone Stories, trying to recall, seeing if I have a memory to even remember where a certain favorite piece came from. But, it's been fun. It's always fun to go back in time. Through our finds. Back in time, through our finds. Some rare stuff. I found out now that bin right there is fairly rare. We're going to do a different one than I have up here. I just don't find serrated pieces around here that often at all. At all. Some in quartz, what have you. But just dynamite stuff. And this is to answer one of a couple comments. Now, here's the bin we're going to do, though. There's about 30 points up here, just small masters. I left one in here from North Gill, maybe 150 yards from the back of my church. Favorite points are in this little bin. We did some variated material the other day. That was a great little point. Check this out, though. All of these fit in that little bin, and now up here with the natural light and the good charcoal contrast on the backdrop. Excuse me. We're going to just take a sort of a tour through it all. And I have to make sure that I take my time because there's so many in that bin. And somebody said, man, you're going to have a new tackle box. There's actually a lot of room in there. You'd be surprised. A lot more room. Many of the bins that you see of appearance can fit 2-3 more points per bin, or much more if they're smaller. All of these fit easily, comfortably, without getting banged up in one tackle box compartment. This is just amazing. It's helped. So I figured I would just grab the handful of my favorite small masters pieces and just take a quick look at them and see what we have for the Stone Stories associated here on Indian Trace. Just a lot of great pieces, as you can see. And so now I in answer to, I think it was maybe Great Basin Man or someone who had a comment about whether or not I needed a new tackle box, that time hasn't come yet. It holds comfortably 800, 850 pieces of where I'll keep it. And just like I made mention before, some of you guys have done bass fishing tournaments. If I find a prize which deserves a place and it happens to be full, that is the tackle box, or the live well, you're going to have to throw one out and put in the better piece. Now, how I handle it on Indian Trace, if I mention that, is definitely not throwing one out. But I can find a good home for some of this stuff. And I don't understand how it happened. But in some regards, I consider myself to have too much. I know that's very difficult for people who collect artifacts to comprehend that. But I like I said, I'm stunned by growing up. And that's a great point from the easement. You know, I have another point right here. It just comes to mind right now. I can see it right here. I see it right there. It came from the same spot. It came from the same 20, 25 feet circle. Right here. And how we all move forward in collecting, the time will be short. These pieces have well outlasted every single story and every historical recording of modern history. They've outlasted the Roman era, the Mayan era, Egyptian civilization, you name it. These are older than most of it all. A couple thousand years at the least. 4, 5, 6,000 years for some of them. And more, probably. This is ground at the base. I can't get a good focus on it. But neat thing about these two is they did indeed come from the same spot. The easement. That doesn't come up that often, I remember it. But, you know, you just move forward and grab your stuff. I was at a place yesterday. Many of you have seen this aired Yadkin, and came from Hidden Hill. Very interesting piece. Hidden Hill puts out some, how should I say? I don't know what to call them. LaCroix and Yadkins of different types. So I've always liked going there, and it continues to produce very unique pieces. Like I said, little points that have caught my imagination, and of course this doesn't come from Hidden Hill. This one comes from the easement. It's a great piece. The sand was dry and high, meaning it's about 2.5 foot rows that had been watered out in a place that a spot that I really hadn't done my duty to check well, but I knew with its scatter that something was happening. So I just moved forward in the driest, worst conditions. Well, I mean, you could see dirt, so it wasn't the worst conditions, but in the dry of it all, this appeared. Great stuff, right? And look at this. This piece here and this piece here. Well, they came from the bear. I have very few sites that put out these triangles. They might well be some of the rarest arrowheads that I have, and they are. You're looking at true arrowheads right there. As far as archaeology would purport, probably late archaic, definitely woodland, maybe late woodland to historic period for the triangles. What I think many archaeologists believe were traditionally fit for arrow shafts, 2 bows and 4 bows. Even a small point like this definitely is an atlatl dart tip, predating these by at least 4,000 years. This piece here is particularly unique, could possibly predate that by 5,000-6,000 years. It's unbelievable when you put all of human history together. Some of the stuff that has been happening undeniably throughout dispensations, Asian history, Australian history, African history, history of South America, and the discoveries, scientific discoveries of artifacts and of things that link together timelines. I can't even, it completely blows my mind. That little piece is got some kind of story behind it, because I do not understand it. What era? It could have had a couple little breaks off the backside of it. I think it probably did, but Riverdale produced that piece. It's great small stuff, isn't it? A couple points here. This one, fairly recent, maybe a year. Smooth as can be there, so I don't know what that means. That came from Notchville. Right on the Big Bend. Wet as can be. No new crop. It's what I call an old crop point, meaning the crop had been plowed under. Harvested already. Just a great looking point. These are some of my favorite small points like this from Mecca. That is rhyolite. Definitely rhyolite. As opposed to, if I pulled it, a blue rhyolite. See, both of those points came from Mecca. This is rhyolite, I'm sure of it. This is rhyolite, I don't understand it. Dark, deep brown in its original flint. And patina's light brown. Give you a close-up and personal of these points. I mean, look at that. So we're going to get through it, make another pile. Just go through one pile, make another. This is within the last calendar year. A lot of these you might have caught on video, but I hadn't seen them in months, so you definitely might not have ever seen them, or might not have seen them. These small points are Most all of them, and I truly believe it, are not bow points. They're atlatl dart tips, even though they're smaller. It's a great point from Mecca. Unbelievable. Here's a point that's not similar to it really, but similar in size. A point came from the rise in site 2 here. Another site. The dominance. Look at the cortex of that. I love it. Within you as a collector for patience has got to be there. Some of the sites I'm rolling through here, looking at these, you might not be able to touch a site well for half a year, depending on the agriculture. And I have it pretty good here. It's not changing a whole lot. I've heard the true stories. It's a great point of split seeding in the woes and omis that they're only split seeding anymore, and that's true. That does happen. Great point from the Falcon. Site 5E. So any point that's close to this size range and what I feel is really great craftsmanship, I put it in that bin. You see just so many in the bin. Another point from the archaic. And like you've seen many of them, they're not all perfect. But there's some kind of quality in these that have caused me to put them in there. These are similar, but these are from different sites completely. So it could be, you never know, that these are from a similar dispensation, time-wise, but the base could say that they're not. And some people, that's just everything that they study. Some of you guys know a whole lot more about it than me. This is from Hidden Alley. Super unique. And this piece right here is from the Cove. Pretty neat, huh? Those are not close to each other. But it doesn't matter, close is relative. They were nomadic, and I guarantee this region, it didn't matter. They didn't just sit in one spot, that's for sure. They were all over the place, from the river to the lakes to the ponds here. There's a favorite point from the archaic. The only thing I found that day, I remember. But this point came from maybe, and look at the relief on the backside, how they made that base. This came from, and I take a little time in this video, I think. Look at that base and how they relieved it right across the where they hafted it in. So unique. But I was looking within 5-10 feet of where I found one of my very first Roans that was rhyolite. And that day it just happened to be, this is the only thing that was up. I had gone before 1 or 2 times, but absolutely great stuff to me. B&B Field, Site 5. Little Marl Mountain, absolutely great work. There is another possibility, because we have no recorded history that predates 1400 that is accurate historical documentation of anything that has to do with motivation or why and how they used all of this lithic toolage. It's that little points like these or these, or even this, in the date of the bow does fluctuate in archaeological documentation. So it's possible, especially when you look at a piece like this, it's possible that it was crafted for the bow. For all the styles of the bigger points and the atlatl dart tips and things that we've seen, well, why not the memory in the family? The genetics of the family and the memory of the family remember that style, and they just made it smaller so that it would suit a bow. It would suit being a projectile on the end of a bow arrow, you know. This is an atlatl, I'm fairly sure of it. This one behind it in Marl Mountain is hard to say. This one's hard to say. Now you can presume that you know. You can even profess that you've studied more than everyone and that you know all the right answers, but I know it probably hurts a lot of people's feelings. I doubt it. I doubt it, because we're talking about huge swaths of time, huge ones, and humanity and how we adapt and adjust, and we use ideas that we've had in the past. I mean, look at this piece right here from Riverdale. Could be a piece that's all the way used up, and they could have fashioned it and made a dart out of it. I find them like this before, and I see the relief on it. So I don't think they were just making a piece, throwing it away. It was used up. Very similar, because I found these two in the same area. So I think we're just playing a little Sherlock Holmes game with all of this stuff. Incredible points, right? They all fit. All those fit nice and comfy in one bin. So that's how I just handle it sometimes, and I'll go through them in the cold season when I can't get out that often. Look at this piece. Great mercy. Another point here. This is from the Archaic, I know for sure. This one here is from Mecca. Since they're top shelf is really why I can just remember them off the top of my mind. I've heard a couple comments about it. It's because I've really edited and edited again what's going to stay in my display quality box. I mean, if I get run over by a truck or something, that's going to be it. That's going to be the collection for my sons and wife. God knows what they'll do with it. I'm not even going to write directions to how they honor it. They just need to think about me and maybe go through some videos and decide what they're going to do for themselves. I'm not too huge on museums, donations to museums. I found museums and the way they practice things to be a little problematic. Look at this piece. It's from the Lookout. Just a unique little marble mountain. So with all of these and all the discussion about dispensations, it doesn't really matter. To me, they're all these you see are all ancient Indian hunting points. What more do you need to know? And I mean ancient. When I use the word ancient, I mean none of these predate, none of these are younger than, I would say, 600 years. No possible way. It's not possible. For that is sure about the evidence. A lot of these, 600 years is laughable. Laughable. A lot of these that you see right here and right here, 600 years is a little sniffle in your nose, because we're looking at some 4,000 or 5,000 years old in some of these. A lot of you know that. And, it's a fun study, but I don't get dogmatic about it. I just practically look at it all. This is a fairly new point this year. Great Marl Mountain, almost G10 from the Cove. Super workmanship on that piece. Color. Piece above it came in about 3 years before it at Coyote Pass in Site 7. I remember the wash it came out of. And I find huge halves most of the time in Marl Mountains, huge ones, made out of this material. And I found some big Marl Mountains made out of this material. It's very interesting. Some of these old points that have survived have such exotic stones to them. Exotic chert. I think you guys call it chert, who knows. I'm just going through in groups so it doesn't take too long. It's been a long video. Check these out. But the small ones, I think they're worth the honor. These are my best small pieces, I would say. All together, they make a great frame. No doubt, I'm with many of you. You frame crazy. And your houses, you've got yourself a museum. Excuse me for the focus. No doubt, you've got yourself a museum. Stunning. Flint's Ball, stunning. Richard, stunning. I have no resistance to that. That's awesome. And I would just have a hard time even leaving my house, even if I had a security system. Excuse me. Look at this rhyolite piece. Notchville piece. This is an interesting piece. It came from Riverdale a long time ago that I found it. Maybe 4 years ago. That's long for my collecting. And I just went the other day. I went over the same exact spots because I always do that. We always do that. You got to admit it. And so, but Nothing there seems to come out and repeat that. Nothing. Interesting that that also came from Riverdale. This piece here, from the Dunes, Site 5. Little pieces, ain't nothing wrong with them. They disappear under your finger. Sure made by masters, right? Look at these two to finish. My word. My word. Of course, here's the top piece, seen by many, from the Cove. Absolutely nuts, right? And here's the top piece from the Bear. Unforgettable piece to me. It was the morning of Election Day 2016. I was praying. And I was just laying it out before God of what I needed for my sons to have for a nation. Not ripped apart, not forced into areas politically that would cause free people to revolt and overthrow tyranny. People say, oh, that's so silly. It's not silly. If people would be honest to look around and see what's going on, see what was actually happening in the hearts of those who decided they would supersede your vote and mess around with the election, supersede my vote like they have a right. We, the people governing this nation, have a right to choose who leads it, and it'll always change, and there should be checks and balances. But that's been messed around with in a way that should offend everyone. And we, the people, are the ones that got to stop it. Look at that collection, will you? And I don't mean it as in my collection, but just a group of points. It's mind-blowing. Now you look at that, I know for sure, outside today, outside in these sites, underneath the ground, the first 2 feet is full, thousands upon thousands and millions of points like this. We just collect a little bit of them for the dispensations of time. They're beyond us. Appreciate you tuning in to Indian Trace. And that right there, well, that's Indian Trace. Now, if you watch the whole thing, you certainly love the North American Indian. If this didn't bore you, but you're with me then. We're going to go forward and do what we can to save, right? Happy winter, and hope you find out there.